listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. My name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine July 26th?
Spencer, hello. Yes, it is July 26th. Wow, July is almost over, and I'm doing well. We've been scorched out here in my neck of the woods today. It's a little bit gloomy, a little rainy, a little bit cooler, so that's kind of nice. But man, it's just a whirlwind of stuff going on the WoW side. Although a weirdly kind of quiet week in the live game, but man, there's just so much other stuff sort of happening, and we're on the precipice of the season roll and all this other stuff. So, yeah, very, very busy WoW times. Even, it's weird. Usually this late in the expansion and this far from the new expansion, it's usually like, well, okay, we'll just do this for a while, and hopefully people will want to do some stuff sometimes. And now it's like, okay, well, make sure you get everything in order because, it's about to be wacky time next week.
It's true. It is. But before we dive into that, we haven't had some ABK news in a little while. And there has been some activity this past week that we just want to cover here at the top of the show.
Yeah, it was kind of an eventful week. Some news came out of Blizzard Albany the other day. Blizzard Albany used to be known as Vicarious Visions. They were a long-running game dev studio that did a bunch of Activision titles, worked on various ports and remakes and stuff like that. They got rolled into Blizzard proper, I think, last year. And now their QA staff has announced their intention to unionize. They are working with CWA, who I believe is the same union that Raven QA worked with. And they've requested voluntary recognition from Activision Blizzard. And that's the most update that I have on that. Raven QA's union was not voluntarily recognized by Activision Blizzard. It went through the drawn out process of, a hearing and a vote. And in the end, the employees that wanted to unionize were victorious. Now, Microsoft, who is, the impending probable owner of Activision Blizzard's assets next summer, has kind of publicly stated that they don't want to interfere, right? Like if employees are interested in organizing, that they're going to be, neutral in that process. So we'll see. I mean, my initial knee jerk is that, well, Activision Blizzard is not going to voluntarily recognize this union, and that they are going to make them go through the entire process again, much like they did with Raven QA. But who knows? Maybe some lessons learned from the last go around. Maybe something about the impending Microsoft deal. Maybe wanting to keep a low profile. I mean, the Microsoft deal is not final yet, and part of the concern from regulators is employee relations. Not recognizing the union voluntarily may not be good PR in that way. Not like Activision Blizzard knows anything about good PR, but who knows? Maybe this one will sail through, and Blizzard Albany QA will get what they're looking for on a faster basis. That would be cool, and it would kind of show like how this stuff sort of snowballs. It's that domino effect as more and more employees kind of organize and get their needs across to their employer. So that's good news. Hopefully we'll have some, more substantial updates on that soon.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they just sort of recognized of, hey, you know what, Raven QA got it done. We should just not stand in the way of this happening with Albany. Let's just let them, do the same thing, right? Yeah.
I mean, for what it's worth, the current powers that be in the U.S. government are pretty favorable to workers' rights and to employees unionizing. So, I don't really think it's hard to say from what we've seen before that like the situation at Blizzard Albany QA is different than the situation at Raven QA. I think the company's big sort of defense, or the reason why they didn't want to recognize the union, was because they didn't think that the QA department was a big enough subset of employees to form a union.
Right.
But the government disagreed on that. So we'll see. So good luck to them, and hopefully they get what they want. The other big news last week was last Thursday, the 21st, which was the year anniversary of the publication of the California DFEH lawsuit against Activision Blizzard. The employees all over the U.S. at various Activision Blizzard sites staged a walkout to end gender inequity. Employees from Irvine, California, Austin, Texas, Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and Albany, New York all participated. And they had a list of things they wanted to draw attention to, including things like, the option to choose fully remote work, to be offered relocation assistance, cost of living adjustments, also this is where it gets a bit thorny, because it's like, ensure that our health insurance partner continues to cover transgender and reproductive health care, including abortion. Unfortunately, in the U.S., our health insurance is a market force and a market factor. But I mean, I think it's good for the employees to tell their employer what they want and need. Also, allow relocation. Include in the audit report requested by shareholders to make sure that sexual harassment audit was conducted fairly and exhaustively. That's something we kind of talked about semi-recently. That report that Activision Blizzard leadership said, hey, shareholders, you don't want this. Don't vote for this. And they did anyway. That's what that's referencing. They're also requesting that ABK leadership agree to hold regular meetings with members of the worker-led Committee Against Sex and Gender Discrimination. And finally, ABK must sign a labor neutrality agreement like Microsoft did recently, so we can freely organize the workplace and bargain for concessions. So those are all things that, this is all sort of springing forth from things that we've seen previously from the ABK Workers Alliance. It got a fair bit of press. I saw it, I saw some coverage in some local news, some national news, game news, business news. And that's kind of the point of doing something like this, right, is making some noise and kind of putting some pressure on your employer. Like, listen, this isn't as good as it should be, and we need it to be different. So it was cool to see. It's weird to think that it's been a year since the publication of the lawsuit. It feels simultaneously like nowhere near a year already and like forever ago at the same time. So, yeah. But hopefully, I'm glad to see that the employees still making noise, still getting press, and still trying to make Activision Blizzard a better place to work, even in this kind of moment of uncertainty for the company, right, as they move towards this Microsoft acquisition.
Yeah, and I recognize when we do ABK stuff at the top of the show, it's not always everyone's cup of tea, but it's important, and it resonates really hard with me, because we actually just went through a union negotiation where we had said no enough times to the proposals that had been going forward and hadn't ratified something that the vote that we did a vote last week was the are we going on strike or not vote, was that what that vote is. Do we accept their last proposal here, or are we basically going on strike inside the education system in September, which is when everything starts getting really, really busy. And they'd come forward with a nice proposal, and we sort of ended up accepting it and everything. It was actually a 98.3% acceptance rate on our vote, so it was fantastic that so many people agreed. But just a lot of this ABK stuff, as far as equity in the workplace, working from home, all these sorts of rules and regulations are things that we had to renegotiate into our contracts, because they just didn't. Some aspects of our agreement hadn't been changed in decades. And in some cases, it was even things like same-sex marriage wasn't actually fully recognized inside all of the language. There were things like, a spouse of opposite sex was like something that was actually in there language-wise. And you're like, well, that's really weird. Why is that in their language? So and things that management didn't argue over, like they were happy to change, but just recognizing that how important these agreements are and how important the language is, and it's a process that you go through, and there is a lot of tenuous things that can happen during it. And I know that, it would be great if Blizzard had more unionization and had more support for their employees, and you're not going to get what you don't ask for. And I recognize the abortion issue inside the U.S. is an incredibly hot topic, and not necessarily something that ABK itself can actually make California change in some way or work in some way. But you got to ask for what you want, and if it allows ABK to advocate for their employees at a government level, then that's amazing. Like, why not, right? Let's get the ask in there. So,
and happier and better supported employees tend to do better work and probably make better games, and then we have more fun playing them, which is why we always try to highlight what the employees are up to. And there are people behind the keyboards that result in us having our games to play, and without them we wouldn't have any of this stuff. It's not the bosses, it's not the managers, it's not the executives, it's not the logo on the box, right? It's the human beings that make the game. So I mean, it's been great to see the strides that the employees have made together in the last year, and that doesn't seem, stuff has sort of ebbed over the course of the year as things have sort of been litigated out and certain things have happened. But obviously the employees involved in the ABK Workers Alliance are in it for the long haul, and they always have the long-term health of the employees in mind. So it's really cool to see. It's a hard thing to do too, because it kind of goes against the grain in the US. We don't have that kind of culture of worker solidarity in this country. So it's nice to see it, and I hope they keep getting what they need.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Moving on to WoW topic for this past week, because this was the last tyrannical week that we are going to see, that we saw in Season 3, and we're coming into the last fortified week this week. Was there anything that you got up to in World of Warcraft specifically around that, or just in general?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, still raiding stuff, obviously. Still clearing out heroic. I think we got like 1, maybe 2 new ahead of the curves last week, like right under the wire, including one guy who was like a real project. I wasn't sure how it was going to go with him, but he did okay, so that's fine. But he's like fresh back to raiding from being away for a long time, and I kind of been easing him into it, like, okay, you could do the easy bosses, but then you have to do more damage than the tanks if you want to stay in the group. That worked out. I was glad we could do that. It was kind of a rocky full clear though, and we stumbled on heroic Anduin yet again, despite all of the nerfs. Like, people just brain fart on blasphemy, and then you can't do the fight. People brain fart on a grim reflection, and you can't do the fight. That's just the way that fight is designed. So, and the way it's still tuned on heroic. But we did end up downing Jailer that first night of raid, so that was fine. I mean, we didn't get as far through the instance as I would have liked, but then we had a night of just nothing but face roll bosses, basically. So that was cool. And then we ended up having enough interest to go on Sunday, which was really fun. Just do a normal mode, grab the Brewmaster. We actually cleared the whole thing. It took 2 hours and 8 minutes or so. We went like one pull over to do Jailer, which normal Jailer at this point is it is a quite straightforward encounter. It was a little bit jarring, actually. I'm used to doing it on heroic now, and it's like the stuff that doesn't happen in normal, or the different timings. I'm like, wait, what happens next? But it was cool. It was my first time on the monk defeating Jailer, and I got some nice gear. I got like all 252 or 259 tier at this point. I'm pretty much outgeared normal raid, so that was great. Dungeons, I think it was a great tyrannical week, but I only got 3 in. I wasn't really playing a lot, and people weren't really around and eager to slam dungeons. I did get a little extra rating for the first time in a while. I think we just smashed a DOS so fast that I got a few extra points. But the cool thing is I helped a few friends and guildies get some new portals, which this is your last week, this week coming up, for portals for every dungeon in Shadowlands except Tazavesh. So, that's starting to get down to the wire. So it was cool to get some portals for people. But beyond that, really, the most time I spent this week was leveling my alts. With Winds of Wisdom up for a limited time. Last week I think I talked about, I don't know if I have time to do everything before this is over, and as it turns out, I had enough time to do it all in a week. So my rogue, shaman, priest, warlock, I smashed them all from 50 to 60 in a few hours apiece, like maybe, 6 hours or something per. So I have all 12 classes at 60, which I didn't think I was going to do this expansion. I'm probably done with Shadowlands leveling, but Winds of Wisdom is no joke. It feels really good. I mean, leveling is pretty streamlined and pretty fast in Shadowlands as it is from 50 to 60. But with Winds of Wisdom, it's just, you don't have to think about what you're doing. You just click on whatever you want to do, you go do it, and you don't even need like a plan, because you get so much XP that bar just fills up and then you're done. So, we still got a week on that. I would recommend taking advantage of it. If you have like a level 50-ish tune or even lower, and you're like, I'm I don't know, I kind of want to do that. Yeah, you definitely have time. I was spending 1 day per character,
So
to get them up there.
I have a great frame of reference for this because I was like, I'm going to take on a little project for this week. I'm going to level a monk. And so I leveled a Kultiran monk who I'd never leveled a Kultiran before. So I was going to get all the, heritage armor and stuff associated with that, which I was excited about. And it took me 14 hours to level from scratch a Kultiran monk from scratch to max level using heirlooms and everything. It was 14 hours played, and that's not with any like leveling tricks or like I'm drinking potions to do fancy things. Like that was, I logged in 6 days out of the week, and in those 6 days I leveled from low level to max level, and so it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours a day kind of thing. And maybe it might have been 3 hours on Sunday, but then like only an hour on one of the days. Like that's sort of like how the spread out kind of worked for me, but it was 14 hours total. I did go and do the monk little like experience quest thing every day that I was on to be able to do it. I didn't play the game on Saturday because I was working all day. But yeah, so a few things I noticed from that. So first and foremost, 14 hours level character is fantastic for me. Like I know there's probably people out there who have all of the fancy tricks and tips and whatnot who can do it in like 6 hours or 4 hours or whatever it is. But I was, I guess, representing the average player, if you will, to sort of going in and stumbling my way through it. I started out, obviously, because I'm Kultiran, I started out in BFA, which is one of my favorite leveling experiences. And just crushed through BFA up until level 50. And I threw on all my heirlooms. And there's two things I want to mention about heirlooms. The first is it's really expensive to upgrade all your heirlooms. I was noticing this. I had a whole bunch of gold left over on Storm Rage from when I moved over to Sargeras, which is where I am now. And you can only take, I think it was 1 million gold with you, so I only took 1 million gold with me. So I left like a bunch of gold sitting on Storm Rage. And I was like, hey, it's a great way to spend some of this gold, since I don't play here as often anymore, is to just upgrade all of my, like literally all of my heirlooms is what I chose to do. It cost...
Oh yeah, that's going to be a pretty penny.
It cost like
everything, all
950,000 gold to upgrade all of my heirlooms. It was insane. I couldn't believe it. I had already upgraded a bunch of them, but sort of like when I was leveling the monk, I was like, oh, I'll put like Hellscream's, staff from Ogremar, that when we were doing Siege of Ogremar, I got the two-handed pole arm, so I threw that on, and I was like, oh, this is one step down. Well, I'll upgrade that one, and so you go over to Ironforge, and you talk with the vendor inside of the Hall of Explorers, and realize like, oh, okay, so it's like the first upgrade tier is not that expensive, and the second upgrade tier, so the first upgrade tier is like 500, the next upgrade tier is 1,000, third upgrade tier is 1,500, and then it jumps to like 5k and 7,500. And there's... Yeah,
that last step is really pricey.
I think there's like 30 heirlooms a page, and there's like 120 or 150 heirlooms total or something. It was a lot. Anyways, I upgraded all of the heirlooms, which was very expensive, but they're all maxed now. So I've got that nice completion kind of... I open up my heirloom frame and everything's all gold laid out and it looks all pretty, which I think is cool.
Yeah,
but
that's nice.
Anyway, so I did that. And the other thing with heirlooms was when I hit level 50, and I noticed this earlier on, but not so much as when I hit level 50. And at level 49, you get the quest to go to Shadowlands. And at level 50 was when I decided, all right, I'm actually going to go to Shadowlands. I left BFA, went to Shadowlands. And at level 50, your heirlooms are garbage, as an FYI, because you technically have entered a new expansion. And so the assumption is that you've looted all of this gear that is a large step up from the previous gear you were wearing because basically I'm wearing like very beginning of endgame BFA gear, and I'm walking into Shadowlands, and Shadowlands is 35 item levels above what that is. And so everything was very hard for me to kill at first until I hit 51. The heirlooms jump by 40 item levels. 40 item levels in 50 to 51.
Yeah, level 50 is weird. It's a weird liminal space. Like, you're not in either expansion.
You're not. It's the strange. It was the strangest thing to mouse over my heirlooms and watch them go from, I think they were 138 to 178 with one step. It was like, this is bizarre. That like your character power astronomically increases when every single piece of gear you're wearing goes up by 40 item levels. And then it sort of tables off again as you work your way up through those levels. So there's two things that I think Liz should look at. One is the cost of heirloom upgrading. I think that should be something that's looked at. I don't think it should cost you, a couple 100,000 gold to be able to actually put together a fully upgraded set of gear for a character. I think that's just a little bit bizarre. But also, I feel like the item level jumps need to be normalized. Like I feel like this is like an artifact that's left over from, hey, when artifacts only went to 50, as in only went to BFA level, this made sense. And then we added Shadowlands and we didn't normalize that item level. Like I feel like the whole thing needs to be adjusted so that there's only a 10 or a 15 item level jump between levels all of the time throughout the whole thing, as opposed to a 40 item level jump at that one point. Because it felt really bad. Like I was having trouble fighting like one mob inside of Shadowlands at level 50, which just seemed really weird for it to feel that dangerous. So, and then to hit level 51 and suddenly be like, oh, hey, this is easy. I can now farm 3 mobs at a time. That didn't make sense. And the other one I want to harp on about leveling in this, as cool as it is and as much fun as it is, the other thing with Shadowlands that's weird is I still like to use the skip, basically, to skip all the story and just go right into being able to do world quests and everything else. Soulbinds are just stupidly gated in that mode. When you are playing through the game inside story mode, you start unlocking soulbinds fairly early on, and you sort of unlock them as you progress through the campaigns for the different covenants. In the skip mode, you cannot unlock any soulbinds at all until you have finished helping every single covenant. So when you finish helping Bastion, for example, the Kyrian, they don't go, okay, well, here's your soulbinds. You can, start using soulbinds and get that character power and, I can go and buy the item that gives me conduits and start using conduits. Like, this would all make sense to me because you can only unlock that skip once you've played through it once. So it's made for alts, right? So why not make that experience easier by just giving you soulbinds sooner? Because what ended up happening was I hit 60 and hadn't finished helping Venthyr yet. And so then I had to work my way through all of these quests trying to finish up Venthyr while I'm at max level before I can unlock soulbinds, which just seems wrong on so many levels. So
yeah, I don't know. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, maybe it doesn't have to work that way, because I think what you have to do is, like, were you playing the same covenant as like one that you've unlocked everything on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I played Kyrian first. I went to Bastion first. I helped Bastion first. Everything was done. I'd complete everything there, but I hadn't unlocked soulbinds yet. Once you've actually helped all of the covenants, you then get to go to Oribos, and they start setting you up with quest chains to go and actually get all your soulbind stuff. And I was like, okay,
I don't know.
There's a
you might have missed
disconnect here.
Because normally, like, you hit level 60 and you go to Oribos and you do you're level 60 now. You can skip everything. You go to your covenant, you join your covenant formally, and then if you've unlocked all of the soulbinds and stuff on your account on another character, then they're just there. And you just talk to them and you unlock all 3 of them. But you have to have done it on another character for that covenant previously. So I don't know. You might have missed something there or something. It doesn't necessarily work that way, but it's not really. It's still very convoluted. It's not just like, okay, well, you click this one thing and now you are back where you think you should be. You have to make sure that you do X, Y, and Z, and then go do the one soulbind, and then go talk to each other individual soulbind NPC, and then go bind with them, and yeah.
That all happens at 60 once you've completed the helping the covenant thing. And for me, the issue is when you actually just level up through the process, you start unlocking your soulbind earlier on. You don't have to be 60 to do it.
Right.
Which is what's odd to me. So it's just strange. Anyways,
yeah, I don't know. I've never actually redone like the campaign. I've always just done Threads of Fate, and you just don't get your soulbinds until.
Yeah, that just seems odd. Why not give it to us sooner? Give us the character power sooner. It just seems odd, especially with the conduit thing added into the game, where you can grab all the conduits at 200 item level. Especially with the renown boost into the game that puts you at renown 60, which, by the way, is amazing because you're renown 80 before you finish hitting 60. But the whole time you're unlocking renown levels, you're unlocking your soulbind trees, which you then don't have access to.
Yeah,
it seems odd to not go, oh, we should attach getting all your soulbinds for a covenant with finishing helping that covenant, regardless of if you're level 52 or 51 or whatever it is. As soon as you finish helping that covenant, here's all the soulbinds for that covenant. Anyways, I know we're like three months out from the new expansion coming out, but
Right, this will never matter.
This is one of those like, they never fixed this, and I wanted to.
Well, it's
talk
part
about
of an
the
example of
experience.
like why these nested systems inside of each other all throughout Shadowlands ended up being such a bad player experience.
Yeah. So, anyways, I have a max level monk now, and I might do the same process this week if I feel like it on another tune. Maybe I'll do a blood elf for something that I haven't leveled all the way through and gotten the heritage armor for, and get all that knocked out. But that was fun. I really enjoyed it. It was super fast, and like I said, it feels really rewarding at this pace. So I do hope they keep this buff around for a while longer. Or
bring it back. Maybe give season 4 a couple weeks to breathe, but definitely bring it back before Dragonflight, please.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see a hindrance in just keeping it around at this point. But yeah, it'd be nice to at least bring it back. As far as raid stuff last week, I was in for a raid clear, and it went well. We cleared the whole raid in 1.5 nights, 2 nights, which felt great. I got my vault this week, which was the triple raid chest for triple mythic chest. And all 3 of my vault slots rolled 285s, Jason. All 3 of them.
Whoa, nice.
That was the nicest thing I have seen.
That sounds nice. It depends on what's inside them, I guess.
So, well, it was Rygalon weapon, it was 285 shoulders, and it was Rygalon ring. And I was like, well, I'm taking the weapon because I don't have that yet, and it means I can now trade it to people if it drops off the boss. But all of this is kind of overshadowed by the season 4 comes out next week, where you're like, all right, well, how valuable is a 285 weapon when we're going to go kill stuff that drops, 20, 30 animals higher next week? But at least I got it now. So this week I get to enjoy it for this week before I replace it next week.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. You want to get as much as you can out of season 3 before you move on, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really nice. That was a nice little surprise for this week. Okay, let's jump into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. Okay, this week in WoW is the Warlords of Draenor Time Walking event, which I find a little amusing because next week when Season 4 launches, we're going to have some Warlords of Draenor dungeons kicking in, and it would have been kind of hilarious, but that was also Warlords of Draenor Time Walking week. But this means the Sign of the Iron is up, where Warlords of Draenor reputation gains from combat and quests are increased by 50%, and characters level 50 and up can access Time Walking versions of Auchindoun, Bloodmaw Slagmines, Everbloom, Grimmail Depot, Shadowmoon, Burial Grounds, and Skyreach. So if you want to practice your Grimmail Depot, you can do that in Time Walking this week ahead of next week when we're going to start seeing it in Mythic Plus. These drop 210 eye-level pieces, which means I should probably get out there on my monk and farm some of this gear, as well as there's a quest to complete 5 of these total, which gets you normal sepulchral gear as well. So you can check that out as well. Yeah, I mean, I think Warlords Time Walking is cool. Having just leveled a character, I now want things like during Time Walking weeks, these expansions should give you more experience while you're leveling through them, because that would be kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, you get the rep bonus, so why not?
You get the rep bonus, yeah. Make that rep and experience, and then be like, all right, this is the week where you want to go and level a character in Warlords, and you get the whole Warlords experience.
That can be cool. I mean, I don't see any big downside considering that we only have Time Walking like every 3 weeks.
Exactly, right?
I'm curious to see like how this feels for leveling with Winds of Wisdom up, because I think Time Walking has been sort of so-so for leveling for most of this expansion. But then again, last time when Mist was up, I ended up leveling that Blood Elf Paladin that I was working on almost entirely up through like 50 to 60 through Time Walking, because it was so time efficient. The Mist dungeons are short. The Time Walking pool has several dungeons that only have 3 bosses in them, so you're in and out in 10 minutes, and then you're getting that giant bonus for for completion. These are not quite as fast, probably, although there are some fast ones in here for sure. So it might feel pretty good with that extra 50% on all the trash you're plowing through, and then getting that bonus over and over again. Plus, Time Walking is generally tuned to be decently favorable. It's not really like super difficult. I don't think any of these dungeons are really particularly bad. Like Grimrail can always be kind of an adventure. Skyreach, I guess, can be too. But other than that, most players, even if they don't know what they're looking at, they can queue into these dungeons, follow the tank around, and kill stuff. So should be pretty smooth runs. And yeah, I have nothing left to level in Shadowlands, so I'm not going to be experimenting with that this week, but it did cross my mind while I was working on those other characters last week.
Yeah, I didn't do any dungeons while I was leveling up my toon. I very much enjoyed the like chill, just doing my own thing kind of experience of the
That's kind of
leveling.
what I like too. Yeah, I think I just like I hit the wall with that paladin where I was like, man, let me just mix in some other stuff here, and then I did a time walking dungeon, and I saw how much the bar filled up, and I went, wait a minute, I think I have to do some more of these.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. As far as Oribos goes, you want to be sure you pick up your Zareth Mortis quest, your a new deal quest, as well as your Patterns Within Patterns quest for heading up to Zareth Mortis. Get those rewards. As far as dungeon quests go, we got Miss Satyrna Scythe and Spires of Ascension. In the PvP realm, we got arenas and arena skirmishes. And the brawl this week is Shadowpan Showdown. That is the Tiger's Peak arena with the two giant bosses that fight each other, and you have to try and defeat the other team's boss while also PvPing with the players on the other team. And so you can have healers on your team who are healing your boss and healing your team, and obviously DPS players, more tank players who are just disrupting stuff. It's actually quite a fun brawl. This to me is like what a true brawl is, in the sense of you radically change what this arena is, right? This arena experience is typically a 2v2 or a 3v3 with two platforms and two pillars kind of idea. Like that's the layout of it. As soon as you add these two bosses in, you add in a few more players, suddenly it's like, oh wow, okay, this is like, we have to we have to really do something different than we normally do in this arena. So definitely a cool one to check out if you get the chance to check it out this week.
Yeah, I think this is one of the better brawls, right? We've hit a few good ones in a row lately. Like we had Comp Stomp and we had Deep Wind Dunk. It's like that good part of the rotation where you get the ones that really mix up the gameplay and do something different. This is definitely one of them. So yeah, it's good. I like the fact that we have weekly brawls. I do think there's maybe a couple brawls that need to get polished up a little bit. Maybe get some different stuff rotated in and out. That would be nice. Maybe have like a seasonal brawl rotation. How about that? Let's get some different ideas in there and get stuff like Gravity Lapse and Arathi Blizzard out of there.
Yeah, well, things that they could certainly work on a lot harder. Yeah, I agree with. World bosses this week, you have Aranamonos the Ever-Branching. This is the big Tiernan in Ardenweald. And is there anything on here my monk should worry about, Jason?
On Aranamonos, no. But if you happen to do a mage or a hunter this week, get it done before Monday, or before reset, I guess, because you got Fevered Incantation for mages, Surging Shots for hunters, and Verdant Infusion for druids. So, this is the last week that the weekly world boss rotation is going to be super boring, right?
Yep. Yep.
Next week, maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll do that 1 week ramp up. That we might be 2 weeks away from like the powered up world bosses, but in the meantime, don't forget, get your memories if you need them, get your anima and all that. It's sitting there for you.
Yeah, basically what Jason's talking about, Season 4, all these guys are going to have all their item levels, so their gear bumped up, so suddenly the weekly world bosses are going to be super interesting again. So provided that kicks in next week, which hopefully, if servers are up early enough, we'll be able to get in and test so that we can talk about it from a testing point of view on the episode. We'll be able to report back on what is live and what people can enjoy next week. Morgeth, the Tormentor of the Damned, is the other big Mossworn up inside Desmateron. And of course, you have Antros, the boss who I have to kill every week on my monk to get that 259 eye level gear and help me get towards my my tier gear as well, because you can get leather feet and leather chest. So leather chest, obviously, I could roll over to being a tier chest, which would be pretty exciting, as well as mail, waist and wrist, plate, helm and chest, and cloth legs and helm. So be sure you're knocking out Antros, which is also worth 20% towards your Patterns Within Patterns quest. So definitely worth doing. Mythic plus affixes for the week are Fortified, Spiteful, and Necrotic, meaning non-boss enemies have more health and inflict more damage. Fiends rise from the corpses of non-boss enemies and pursue random players, and all melee attacks apply a stacking blight against players that inflicts damage over time and reduces healing. Fortified Necrotic is always kind of a gross combo, although at least Necrotic drops off faster now, so it's not quite as impactful as it used to be. Spiteful also kind of sucks, because these fiends rise up and chase players, and if they melee players, they do majority of their health and damage, and it also does additional damage the next time they hit them, so you really have to avoid them. And Fortified applies to Spiteful, which means the Spiteful ads have more health, so they take longer to die. They do rot over time, but you can also DPS them down. They do lock you in combat, which means Spires of Ascension is always kind of gross, because you're trying to take the flight path over from one of the islands to another, but you can't do that while you're in combat. So there's all these fiends up that are chasing you, so you have to turn and kill all the fiends. that's a pain in the butt. Overall, like this isn't. I don't think this is a terrible week because you're not dealing with tyrannical bosses. You're not dealing with some of the other more offensive affixes that are out there. But it does still kind of suck because necrotic plus fortified means mobs last longer, so they're going to be applying necrotic for longer. You have spiteful, which applies with fortified. Like it's a fully symbiotic thing going on. So this is a pretty gross week. This is not the best week to sign out on season 3 fortified with.
Yeah, it's not the easiest 4 week. I don't think it's too bad, but it's a bit of a mixed bag because you can kind of pull big if you want to, right? It depends on your tank's comfort level. Necrotic has been nerfed a lot. It doesn't stack up as fast, and it doesn't last as long. So if your tank or just your overall group has like good synergy with like, okay, I'm going to drop an AoE stun, I'm going to knock stuff back a little bit, I'm going to drop a binding shot or whatever. You can be in combat with a lot of mobs. That's not going to be a problem. Spiteful is an on death effect, but it's weird because it's not like it's not like a bursting or a sanguine or something where you can't afford to have it going off on one mob earlier than the rest. You have to pay attention to it. You can't have a spiteful ad meleeing you, but you can kill kind of like one mob at a time and chain pull and keep going if you want to. So that does sort of offset some of the worst stuff about sloggy Fort Week. Like this is still, you're going to spend a lot more time on trash than you really want to. I mean, the good thing is that the bosses are going to essentially melt. Yes, boss attacks will apply necrotic, but I can't think of too many bosses in this pool where that really becomes a problem for your tank. That has to be like actually managed because normally they're going to do some kind of animation or they're going to, teleport to the middle of the room and channel a thing. And then you're going to have 5 seconds for your stacks to tick off. So, it's a mixed bag. I mean, Spiteful is just not one of my favorite affixes to deal with in general. Because, I mean, you mentioned Spire, Smith's Eterna Scythe. Like, ironically, they're the 2 quest dungeons this week, right? Those are places where Spiteful is really going to slow you down because you're not going to be able to advance through parts of the dungeon while you're in combat, which is just obnoxious. That timer's ticking. You want to keep moving. You want to keep fighting. You don't want to be, you're wasting time and energy defeating the ghosts that don't, fill up your bar. So it's a bit of, I would say it's a mixed bag this week, but if you need something out of this pool as this season ends, if you need Keystone Master, if you need rating, if you're trying to get 3K, if you're trying to get portals, I don't feel like this combo is going to prevent that from happening on any grand scale where it's like, I would have gotten this done in season 3, but the last week it didn't line up. I think you can do it this week. I guess the only thing I would like to mention while we're on Mythic Plus is spend your Valor this week.
Right. Yeah.
Once you are done running dungeons for the week, spend your Valor before reset. There is no Valor cap in season 4. But Valor is being reset. So there's no reason to take that Valor conversion into a trivial amount of coin. Spend it, upgrade some stuff. Who knows? Maybe you'll want to use it next year or buy some gear. Remember, the gear vendor, the BOA vendor has Valor gear that you can buy and send to other characters on your account. So if you don't have anything you want to upgrade, spend it on that. That's a great way to use it. A lot better than turning it into trivial coin. So just don't forget. You don't want to log in Tuesday after maintenance and go, I forgot. Well, I got 400, silver. I don't know what the conversion rate is. It's not very good. It's not like, we'll save up your Valor.
It's typically like a silver to Valor is what it typically is.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. It's just not. That's not what you want. So go spend that stuff. But spend it after you've done your dungeons for the week in case you get a cool drop.
Yeah, I feel like even at a gold to Valor, it's still not super worth. Like in some cases, people might get 15, 20K a gold, but that's still not really worth it comparatively to spending all that Valor on other things.
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, I'm planning on upgrading some stuff that I'm on the fence about whether or not I'll use it. But I'd rather do that than. And I've banked 7,600 Valor at this point, so I'll probably end up around 8K Valor. I would much rather do this in case I use this gear or it's interesting or cool or I buy BOA gear or whatever than get 8,000 gold in the mail.
Yeah.
At this point. So, yeah, I don't know. Just a reminder on that. I've seen some people that I play with have been confused because they're like, there's no Valor cap in season 4. And it's like, yes, that's true. but your season 3 Valor is not going to work in season 4.
Going to go away. Yeah. Yep. All right. Wins to Wisdom buff is still up. That's what I was talking about at the top of the show. So that's leveling from 10 to 59. It's still live through this week. So be sure you're taking advantage of that buff through this week. I might level another character kind of casually and just have a good time with that. That was kind of cool. I like Jason's idea of just going back to all of my tunes that I leveled for BFA and just leveling them up to Shadowlands level. That's another really efficient thing to do. I just don't have them all on Sarg, so I was just leveling characters on Sargeras. I now have I think I have 9 characters on Medivh. I have 8 characters on Stormrage. They're spread out all over the place because I never really transfer them all around. I just level a new one on the new server. I only transfer around my main. So I have to decide between those two things. But I'll circle back to that towards the end of the show when we get to the patron stuff, because I have a question for patrons that involves something like that. Okay. Season 4 Fated Raid schedule. We got the official Fated Raid schedule. This basically means that on August 2nd, we're going to be dealing with Castle Nathria being fated, and then it's going to be Sanctum, and then it's going to be Sepulchre, and then it's going to be Castle Nathria, and then it's going to be Sanctum, and then it's going to be Sepulchre. They're just confirming that, and basically, the only interesting thing about this post that we didn't know already is that they say that this rotation is going to continue until eventually it's removed and all raids are fated. So we know that from August 2nd until September 6th, for sure, we are rotating raids each week as to which one's fated. We don't necessarily know what's happening after that, if that's what they mean by at this point. So a month after they've done it, or in this case, 6 weeks after they've done it, they're going to then roll over to everything is fated, or whether it's going to happen even later in the season, like in October or November or something like that. But just be aware that that's coming at some point. Part of the concerns I'd raised earlier was just the fact that if people are trying to get their mounts from Mythic Jailer in particular, this might disrupt your raid a little bit, having fadeds happen. So you might be in a situation where you go to do, faded Jailer for the week because you sort of log in to do it, and it's a lot more difficult than you thought because of the faded affix and because things have scaled up and all the item levels scaled up, and you aren't able to get your mounts for that week during that faded week. So there could be a certain amount of reprog. A lot of the hope and what I'm hearing from people in the community is that they want this season to be face roll. They want it to just be, you walk into Fated Castle Nathria, you can clear it in 2 nights maximum, and it's no problem at all. It doesn't really disrupt anything. You just get a big loot pinata and you get to play around with an affix that makes things a little bit more interesting. That's kind of what everyone seems to want. We don't know what we're going to get. Blizzard hasn't specifically stated as to where their tuning objective is for Fated. So we're hoping that it's somewhere in that realm, but just cautioning teams that when they walk in next week, I know our raid leader initially was like, I think we'll start with Heroic Fated Nathria, and then we'll move to Mythic, and that way we can kind of get a taste of what stuff feels like, whereas other people on the team are like, no, we're just walking straight into Mythic. Let's just walk straight into Mythic, and I'm sure we can blow this up. It's no problem. It's just that thought process of, remember, this is an item level jump. It's like a new tier coming out in that sense. So if they're planning on everyone having 30 more item levels from where you are right now to do the new Mythic content, it might feel difficult for you. So we'll see what happens, but just the cautionary tale there of Fated stuff. Okay.
Yeah, we really don't know what to expect. I do think it's interesting that they're all going to be fated after, who knows when. Sometime after September 6th, right? They're going to do 2 full rotations at least. And then, eventually everything's going to be fated, which is going to make it really easy to get those dinar that you need, right? Because you need to kill 30 or whatever. They're adjusting it. But the initial idea was 30 fated bosses, then 20 fated bosses, then 10 fated bosses to get your 3 coins to buy the items that you want. Well, if you have 30 available bosses fated in a week and all of LFR is open and everything like that, then you can you could do that pretty fast, right? Well, I guess fast in terms of number of weeks, not amount of time spent in the game. But you don't have to wait for okay, I need a reset so I can kill some more fated bosses. So that's cool. I mean, maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll flex on the cap on dinar if we get that far into the process. But yeah, I don't know really what to expect here. I hope, like you said, that it is pretty face rolly. I just want this season to be fun and chill, and I don't want to be slamming our heads against bosses that we already killed once upon a time. I don't think that's really fun for anybody, and that's not a cool way to send off the expansion. I think that would sort of go against what the whole point of season 4 seems to be. So hopefully the tuning will be favorable. It will be weird going back into Nathria and having to like pay attention to stuff and sort of relearn mechanics and whatever. But that'll be a task for next week. We got one more week of Sepulchre here, but yeah, man, there's a lot of bosses here that we got to reacquaint ourselves with for sure. I hope it works out. I think this could be a cool model going forward for the end of expansion. At the outset, I'm feeling a little trepidatious. This is an overwhelming amount of bosses to feel comfortable with if they're like anywhere near typical like difficulty tuning per difficulty rank, like normal, heroic, mythic, etc. And also, of course, the dungeon pool thing is very intimidating for Mythic Plus. It seems like the dungeon pool is not going to be very fun. So I don't know. I'm on the side of like, make it easy. Let us gear up. Let us get just silly powerful and just blow up all the bad guys and ride off into the sunset. So right. I guess we'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll figure out what they're wanting to do as far as that balancing goes next week. And then we'll be able to report back to you guys and let you all know what it's looking like. Okay, Dragonflight Previews. We got 2 different previews. The first preview we got in a blog post was about the Forbidden Reach, which is the sort of initial secret training ground for the Black Dragonflight. It's basically the starting area for the Drakthir. That's sort of what people are getting a look at and going to be diving into. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil the zone or spoil stuff like that. There's going to be stuff all over the internet about it, I'm sure. But basically, what they're doing with alpha cycles right now is pretty much every week they are either wiping or limiting the access we have to different areas. And so they're basically saying the Drakthir starting zone is the area that everyone is going to be directed to at this point, and you are going to be feeling what it's like to first get dragon riding, first to get, a Drakthir and leveling a Drakthir up, first get access to all of those sorts of things. So that initial expansion experience in its alpha state is what that initial preview was. Do you want to talk at all about the Forbidden Reach, Jason?
Just a little bit, yeah. I mean, I think you should check the post out if you haven't, even if you're trying to remain like relatively fresh. Like there's, I think there's enough here to set the stage for like what the point of this area is and just give you a taste of it without really getting into the nitty gritty. And, I didn't get a chance to play this week's alpha build. I was just, I was busy and I haven't been feeling great. And I sort of had an alpha stream penciled in for last night that I ended up not doing because I've just been, I haven't been feeling good enough to be doing that kind of thing. So, and talking that much. So I didn't. And so I haven't played this at all, but I did check the post out and man, like it really, this has a lot in common with some other, classic zones throughout the game's history that I really like. And with that sort of, Titan vibe that I think we're going to see throughout Dragonflight and the Dragon Isles, right? As the Titans sort of empowered the Dragonflights and the Dragon aspects as sort of the protectors of the realm, so to speak, of Azeroth. So you get those kind of touches that you've seen in, in the game from the earliest days on Azeroth, right? Like the Titan ruins and all that. Except these aren't quite as ruined as some of the other ones in some ways. And I don't know. I think of zones like Sholazar Basin and, Ungoro Crater, stuff like that. Just those sort of like really, it's got that like, that sort of air of mystery about it, but it's sort of this really primal kind of place too. Really cool stuff. It's, I just can't say it enough. Like this is exactly the kind of stuff I want to be doing in World of Warcraft. This is a sort of high adventure type of vibe that I like. So, it looks really good to me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I guess if there was only one reason for you to go check out the post, it's to actually look at the pictures of the fox wyverns. Probably one of the coolest little critters that they've added. There's basically, it's a wyvern, but it's a fox, and it can fly around, and it's adorable. So be sure you get out there and check out these little monsters that would terrify me in real life, but are great inside of my video games. If those things existed in real life, I'd be very scared.
Yeah, you don't want them actually flying at your real life face.
Exactly. All right, and then they have obviously the second preview, which was get to know your Drakthir Evoker, and basically it just goes over the Drakthir Evoker class, talking about its 2 different forms and its armor type, which is male, and which weapons it can use, and goes through that aspect of the blog. It's basically your typical, hey, here's a new class, here's how the things you should check out about it. So if you're interested all about Evoker, definitely check out which obviously both these will be in the show notes as links, but the Get to Know Your Evoker list blog post basically covers everything from its energy, which is its essence that it uses to spend and do abilities, all the way through to its different spell schools when it comes to blue spells and red spells and green spells and bronze spells that it's going to be casting. And it's a great overview of the class. So if you're interested at all in just learning more about the Evoker without watching a streamer or watching a content creator basically go through the entire class for you, the blog post is actually a fantastic way to go through that. So that's super exciting. They even
kind of lays out like what the idea is, right?
Yeah.
Like what the fantasy is, and then sort of the mechanical stuff of like, okay, how does it work? What is stuff called? It gives a couple examples of different types of spells, like different racials and stuff like that.
The racials
too,
to me is the other thing. Yeah, I love how they cover the racials.
Yeah, it's really a nice like top level view of it without getting too like nitty gritty on moment to moment gameplay or anything. It's more just kind of the fantasy and sort of the type of character that you're inhabiting when you play a Dracthyr Evoker.
Yeah.
There is one part about creating your Dracthyr Evoker that I think is not worded super clearly, and I will admit that I don't totally understand. They're a hero class, right? So they start at level 58. You're not starting at level 1, and you're not going to be in Northshire Abbey, fighting wolves or whatever. You can
as
create.
Hilarious as that would be, I think it would be hilarious.
That would be really cool.
You're
Yeah.
at level 1. But
Right. I have to
continue.
shift into dragon form to breathe fire on this, level 1.
That's the only ability you have is breathe fire. So like you have one ability on your body.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You can create your first one with no restrictions as long as you own Dragonflight. You're only able to have one Dracthyr per realm.
Yeah.
Subsequent Dracthyr can be created once there's a level 50 non-Dracthyr character on the realm you wish to create it. So they're saying there's no restrictions except this restriction, but then the restriction goes away once you meet this condition, which is it's not super clear. I assume this means you can have one Dracthyr per realm as long as you have a level 50 on that realm.
It's to combat sellers, right? It's to combat sales, because sales would just go, I'm going to make
max level.
Yeah, I'm going to make 1 billion level 58s. So in this case, they're at least saying, all right, in order to make more than one level 58, you have to level another class to 50 on your server, which will unlock the ability to then make more level 58s if that's what you're wanting to do. So it's just putting up a barrier so that it's less easy to just go create 50 level 58s and just spam on every server you want to spam on. That is the
problem with hero classes. I think hero classes are the way to go when they're adding new classes to the game, but it does create these kind of wrinkles where it's like it's just the correct way to make max level characters and everything like that. It sort of de-incentivizes investment in other characters in certain contexts or for certain purposes. So yeah, I think the way it came out in this post is a little bit more confusing than maybe it really needed to be.
It could, yeah. I mean, the summary of it is you can make one at level 58 without having to have, like, you could buy Dragonflight and the first character you make could be a Dracthyr. You could do that. It'll be level 58. But you cannot make a second Dracthyr on that realm until you've leveled another character to 50. That is what they're saying. You could go and make a level 58 on another realm. You could do that, but you can't make one on the same realm, is what I think they're sort of limited. The limit here is what they're doing. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, I think it is cool that, like, if you're a brand new customer, player, or somebody who's been going for a really long time, but you just think this looks really cool,
you can jump.
There are no hoops to be jumped through if you just want to play a Dracthyr Evoker and check it out. You can buy it, and you can then play that when it comes out. And, oh, man, that was my big complaint about Allied Races the entire time we saw that system, is, like, people were buying BFA, who had been away from the game for years because they saw a Dark Iron Dwarf on the box and they wanted to play it, and they get home and it's like, I have to play through the entire game and jump through 1 million hoops first, and then I get to do this. Like, I'm not doing any of that. Actually, goodbye. You can't do that, and they shouldn't have done that, and I hope they never do it again. But I like the way that they're handling it with Dracthyr Evokers, where it's included. You buy the game, you have access to them. Go make one and go have fun.
All right, the next chunk of feedback came in about hunters again. Basically, hunters are getting all of the attention. I don't really understand why, but they're getting all of the attention. And so this comes in from Nimox, referencing specifically to True Shot is a massively weak major cooldown when compared to other 2-minute cooldowns such as Combustion or Vendetta, which isn't wrong. Combustion and Vendetta are probably some of the strongest 2-minute cooldowns in the game. I would argue that there's other weak 2-minute cooldowns, but if we're talking specifically about hunters, sure. And
Yeah,
so
it was the hunter feedback thread. So,
sure.
that's, basically the idea here is like my 2 minute isn't as good as the super powerful 2 minutes.
Yeah. So Nimox says, this is an interesting point of discussion. Cooldowns that are significant power swings, such as combustion, often define your playstyle. You likely need to combo in as many effects as possible to skyrocket up your damage in a short time frame. Whether or not you get lucky with procs or whatever else in that window dictates a lot about your performance over the fight as a whole. You also start feeling much less effective outside of these damage windows as you peak very high and then go down into a lower state of throughput until the cooldown is available again. Vent your boomkins. So,
I was going to say, is anybody familiar with that kind of playstyle?
Yeah, weird. It's just like I do 80% of my, or 90% of my damage for the fight inside two 20 second windows. Very strange. Weird. Yeah, that was an extreme example for sure of that type of thing happening. And I would emphasize the interesting factor to this about this feedback is I always compare a lot of this sort of feedback now to Drakthir, where it feels very similar, where you do the majority of your damage within a cooldown window, and you sort of maintain stuff outside of that. So where you place those cooldown windows and what happens within those cooldown windows is incredibly important to what your performance is for the entire fight. And so that's sort of what Nimox is starting to get at here. Continues to say, not every cooldown needs to be a significant swing. If True Shot is made stronger, your average damage outside of True Shot will likely go down to compensate. Should True Shot be a big damage swing cooldown like Combustion? The current thought is no. And so what they're getting at here is, hey, do you want to be Venthyr Boomkins when it comes to what your damage profile looks like? If you do a ton of damage in this short little window, and then you do very little damage outside of that window, similarly with Combustion for mages, or do you want to be someone who does good damage overall, consistently through a fight with small peaks here and there from when these cooldowns come off cooldown, right? And they're sort of looking at those damage profiles being like, not everyone needs to be the Venthyr style of cooldown or the Combustion style of cooldown. It's okay to have classes that just do good damage, and when they use this 2-minute cooldown, they do slightly better damage inside of that cooldown window, which I really appreciate because it does create a more diverse playstyle for players. And it also, if everyone was in the Venthyr camp, if you will, you would see Blizzard start designing encounters based around that. Bosses would have like giant damage reduction shields that go up at really odd windows to try and trick players into using their big cooldowns during this damage reduction window so that you then didn't do as much damage and it wasn't effective. So where you're using your damage would be even more important than it currently is, which would then make the game even more challenging and more obscure for your average player. So don't do that. I don't want them to go down that path. Please have variety. Variety's good. Nimox goes on to say the points made about precision shots during the True Shot window are valid feedback and is something we could work on to make better. But at the same time, we're also currently okay with some things like precision shot stacks are quote unquote wasted during this window. True Shot makes your gameplay feel significantly different while it is active, which is great. The cooldown has changed to plus 20% critical strike chance. It remains effective and a good burst window, but doesn't feel like you're going to do something special other than getting a few more critical hits. That's not to say that secondary stats or a percent critical buff are bad. It's just different, which I also agree with in the sense of it's not as uninteresting because it doesn't dynamically change everything that you're doing as your class inside of that window. Like you don't change your entire rotation in a huge dramatic way because you get this critical strike chance necessarily. That's okay. You can just take the buff and use it on cooldown and have it feel really good if you want to, or you can use it during specific cooldowns. Lahuvum's a great example. You have to kill those ads in a very tight time window. And guess what? The ads are up almost every 2 minutes, which means literally this big critical strike cooldown thing syncs up with when you need to apply your damage. You can then actually be able to use this particular ability every time you need to be able to do that damage boost. And it's not going to have a big ramp or change something dramatically. You are just going to pump harder inside this window with what you're doing. So I appreciate that they are listening to the hunter feedback that's coming in, but they're also being very clear that they don't want every class to be a cookie cutter thing where your class does X damage well, all classes do X damage, except for when they press this 2-minute cooldown, then all classes do Y damage. That just wouldn't be dynamic and interesting, and it would be harder to balance for, to be honest, because some classes hit more targets, et cetera, et cetera. And if they made everything the same, it would just be really boring. So I like this feedback. You're getting good answers out of devs, so congratulations on submitting a question that Nimox really dug into, because it's great to hear the response, and it's cool to hear their example and their explanation. But I am good with their answer. I think this answer makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want that texture, right? If you want combustion, then play a fire mage, right? Like, that's kind of the way I look at it. You know, each spec should sort of have its own personality, its own sort of damage profile, its own things that it excels at. And, you know, a class or a spec that has pretty good, like, persistent damage, doesn't have these really big spiky moments. Well, no, they can't have a big spiky 2-minute, because the spiky classes need that, right? Because they're not spiking as much when they don't have it. I mean, I think it's a good question to ask, because you're sort of like, you're comparing apples to apples in some way, right? Like the 2-minute for this spec versus the 2-minute for this spec versus the 2-minute for this spec. I think that's an interesting thing to hear devs speak on, and how they look at that and what the goals are there. But obviously the goal is not that every single one of these behaves the same way, and that they're all equally impactful to, you know, the damage pie overall for a spec. Like, I think that, I don't know. One of the cool things about WoW to me, going back to the earliest days, and which I experienced this past week, is how different each class and each spec feels. You know, it's a different experience. You have different priorities. It feels like substantially different going from playing, you know, an outlaw rogue to a shadow priest, right? These are just wildly disparate gameplay styles that are all baked in the game. And I think if they tried to homogenize stuff more, where things sort of did damage the same way and they wanted to kind of build to the same moments, I don't think the game would be as cool. And I don't think it would feel as good to switch between different specs and check them out and try out different classes and level up different characters. I think everything would feel a lot more bland, because you were sort of always going in the same direction. And I mean, obviously that's like a huge extrapolation from what we're talking about here just with 2 minutes. But, you know, I think part of the way that you keep those specs and classes moving in interesting directions and standing on their own is looking at that at every level, including stuff like, you know, damage cooldowns and things like that. Like, you know, you don't really, you want like an interrupt to be the same among like a class role, right? Like a spec, like, okay, all your melee classes have about the same interrupt or something, because that's sort of an assumed part of encounter design. But other than that, they should have their own personalities. I mean, that's definitely a thing that appeals to me about the game in general. So it's nice to see that reinforced.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, it's. I just want to give props to the original poster, because drawing answers like this out of the dev team is always something that's very cool, and it requires a really good question. So it's great to hear them reinforcing that they want to keep this diversity and this kind of grit between the classes. But I also like that this was some information we got, so it's always cool. So props to the original poster. All right. Notable hotfixes. Burning Crusade Classic. Creatures in most dungeons have been adjusted so that it is now significantly more difficult to snare and kite them to a large degree. Well, that sounds horrifying. I mean, every time we do this, I think of the Hellfire dungeons and how important it was to be able to snare and root and be able to outrun and kite these creatures. So the fact that they're doing that is going to make these dungeons a lot more dangerous. To go in part with that, in dungeons, group experience has been greatly reduced whenever there is a large disparity between player levels in the same group. And that's just to fight the boosting that's taking place with people. So that makes perfect sense. But the kiting thing, I have to assume, is also to fight the boosting that's happening.
Yeah. It's so that, like, you know, you don't have a bunch of players essentially like not interacting with the dungeon, while, you know, a higher level player can just kind of keep everything on a leash and eventually kill it all, and then the whole group benefits from it so much. Yeah, this is basically just trying to shut off the boosting meta in Burning Crusade Classic.
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to work. You know, this is And it's an issue I think that the Classic team is really going to have to just keep their eye on as long as Classic continues, at least to some degree, right? Like, you want players to be able to help each other out, and you want there to sort of be methods for, players to benefit from having a friend who's a higher level or whatever, and to be able to catch up and play together. But at the same time, like what we've seen over the years with Classic, I mean, Classic's been out, 3 years now almost. And, what we've seen so much is that, like, boosting is just part of life. It's just, it's one of the, like, it's such a prevalent activity on Classic servers. And it does really, like, sort of undermine the integrity of the game. It's not people who are, like, friends participating in the thing together. Somebody's, like, helping their friend out and gaining some small advantage. It's, it's transactional and it's non-interactive. So I think that's, I think for me, those are the reasons why I want them to stay on top of it and to not really allow these sort of cases where boosting is optimal as much, and kind of restrict these channels in game that, just make it an undesirable thing. If people are looking for each other in chat channels or whatever, it's because they want to participate in something together, or, engage in some kind of transaction over an item or what have you, not because somebody's just looking to buy, dungeon boosts all afternoon so they can get their character leveled up. Like, it's, I don't know. I think it's sort of unavoidable, especially with, like, TBC Classic. It might be better in Wrath, actually, because heirlooms will be in and stuff, I assume. I mean, I guess they could shut them off, but I haven't seen anything that says that they're not putting heirlooms in Wrath, which, that really eases a lot of the pressure of catching up a tune, and, that whole big, level up gap that you got to cross to get a new character up to play with your friends is not quite as bad. So yeah, I mean, hopefully this is effective, and then, the game is to be played. It's not, I don't know. I don't know how to describe this really. I can't, a metaphor doesn't really spring to mind. It's sort of like paying somebody else so that you can watch them go on an amusement park ride, but then you get, like, a teddy bear on the way out of the park or something. Like, you don't get to have, like, the experience, right? You're just standing there watching them do it, boost you.
It's the long run. The classic going on a date at a carnival thing, man, where the one person's doing all the shooting of the ducks off the, like, backboard to get all the prize tickets, and they're giving someone a teddy bear that they won by doing it. Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah, I mean, like, you do get, like, a long-term benefit from it, but yeah, I don't know. I want them to minimize boosting as, like, the correct way to play Classic, and I think that's going to be an ongoing battle, just because the population for Classic seems very volatile, and of course, like, as we know, there's a lot of, like, dead servers and stuff, and, well, what are you supposed to? You can't even probably get boosts on some of those. It's a weird situation, and it's something that, like, the live game doesn't suffer from in the same exact way.
Yeah, it's a curious thing, right? Because it was part of the Classic experience. So how much of this is like, well, you know what? This existed in Classic, so to be true to Classic, it should still exist in this, right? Like, you can get into that whole philosophical debate about what Classic is and how it should work. But yeah, in short form, they made these changes to try and reduce the amount of boosting that's taking place. Another hotfix we want to cover is about Streets of Wonder, where they fixed an issue that sometimes caused the items in the market to become uninteractable during the trading game that you're supposed to do. I've experienced this, where three of our people couldn't interact, but only 2 of them could. That felt really weird. To just be like, I want to pick up the item, but I can't. It's right there, but I can't. And watch someone else pick it up, and you're like, what is going on? That felt very strange. So I'm glad they resolved that. That's a good thing. As far as world events go, it's just the reminder that Winds of Wisdom's still up, and that's up inside of the hotfixes as well. Okay, WoW Classic, Burning Crusade, NA Realm Consolidation, coming August 9th. I know Jason's asking when it's happening with live game, but for now, Burning BC's getting them.
Well, I don't need Realm Consolidation with the live game. We just do Realm Connections, but these realms closing. You're not going to be logging into these realms anymore really soon.
Yeah, this is the big old warning. There's an EU list as well, I'm sure. So be sure you're checking out for how this affects your gameplay. But yes, August 9th, we're only 2 weeks out now. Anathema, Arcanite Reaper, Bigglesworth, Blomo, Deviate Delight, Fairbanks, Fellstriker, Heartseeker, Herod, Incendius, Kurtonos, Crom Crush, Kirinax, Lotheb, Netherwind, Radogor, Reaper, Scarum, Smolderweb, Stalag, Solthaze, Thalnos, and Thunderfury. All of those realms, if you recognized one of the ones that your characters are on, they are going bye-bye as part of the consolidation. Move your characters before this consolidation happens. Otherwise, you could potentially lose access to your characters for a couple weeks. Also, move your characters before this happens because then you can claim your name on whatever realm you're going to, because you'll be flagged for a name change if someone already has the name on a realm that you get auto-moved to when the consolidation happens. So get in there and change it if you're playing on those servers.
And the big thing here, too, is that Arcanite Reaper NA just got added to the list yesterday.
Yeah.
So if you haven't been paying too close attention to this, but you have classic tunes on Arcanite Reaper, that server is also going bye-bye 2 weeks from today. So make sure that you take advantage of the free character move, put it where you want it to go, and retain access to it throughout the whole process. To Blizzard's credit, they gave us a very long-term heads up about this and made it easy to deal with, right? But we're down into sort of crunch time here. This is almost actually going to happen. And, I don't know. Is Arcanite Reaper the last server they're going to add? Hopefully. I feel like Arcanite Reaper is like on the borderline of like, this isn't enough time to notify players. And I think anything after that will be definitely not enough time, but who knows? Maybe they add something else next week, later this week, whatever. Just keep an eye on it. If you play Classic on a lower pop realm, you don't want to just get dumped somewhere that you have no control over, and you don't want to potentially lose access to your character for any length of time. So I don't know. This probably won't be our last PSA about this on Starting Zone, but this one I felt like it was worth bringing this back up this week because of the addition of the Arcanite Reaper realm.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we also have official launch date for Wrath. Wrath Classic is going to be arriving on September 26th. So for those of you who are wanting to dive in, it's going to be 3 p.m. global launch Pacific time, so 6 p.m. Eastern. Globally, you'll be able to start hopping into Wrath of Lich King Classic. I know a lot of people who are very excited for this. I think this is a great launch window, simply because it is before Dragonflight and a good chunk of time after Season 4. So when it comes to like what you're wanting to do, like obviously there's not a lot going on in Classic at the moment if you're not playing inside Wrath Beta or something like that. So this is one of those windows where a lot of players, I think, who are playing Season 4 will just be hitting that point where it's kind of a little bit old hat and something new might be cool, and they're launching Wrath Classic, and you'll be able to spend probably at least 4 or 5 weeks in Wrath Classic before we start seeing Dragonflight stuff come out, which means it's a great window to do it. So I'm very pleased with that launch date. I think it's a great choice by them. So super excited.
I agree. It's a little bit earlier than I thought. I thought we were looking at probably October sometime. But then last week, I think they, on the beta, they just they did raid testing. They enabled arenas and everything. And it was like, okay, well, they're about done here, I guess. So, it was kind of funny because they sort of accidentally posted this on Friday and then took it down and then, made the official announcement yesterday, which I don't know. I don't know why that stuff happens all the time with this game. Like, I don't know if they were just trying to get people excited for Monday and for the announcement, or if somebody flipped a switch they weren't supposed to, or whatever. But at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, it's on the website on Friday. We meant to put it up on Monday. Do we just leave it up? I don't know. I'm not a marketing professional. I don't understand why these decisions get made. So I just think it's curious.
Yeah, I don't know why that happens either. I think important thing to note is Wrath Classic is just included in your WoW sub. For the coolest thing I think about adding Classic to the game in general has been it's made you get more out of your sub every time they did it. Like, they haven't asked you to spend on WoW Classic, WoW BC Classic, on now Wrath Classic. They're just adding these back in. There's no like $10 pack to unlock. Like, they're not doing anything. It's just if you pay for a WoW sub, you get access. And so I'm thrilled.
No charge or anything on your sub.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that that's the way they went. So that's great.
It is a little weird this time. I will say, like, when when original WoW Classic came out, right, 3 years ago, it was around the game's 15th anniversary, and they did the 15th anniversary collector's editions. There was like a physical thing you could purchase that didn't really have anything to do with WoW Classic specifically, other than like it kind of evoked a lot of stuff from that era of WoW, and it included game time, I guess, which you could use to play WoW Classic. It came with mounts for the live game, and it came with a statue and some other stuff. last year when TBC Classic came out, they did like a premium, the digital premium thing that had rewards for both TBC Classic and retail. So far this time they have nothing on the store for Wrath Classic, which I don't know if that's going to change. I was kind of like,
it's probably going to change.
It's probably going to change, but this is also kind of why I was surprised about, like, okay, they pulled the website release date announcement down on Friday, and I thought, like, okay, well, they must not be ready to do the big push, and then they did a big push yesterday, except there's nothing on the shop. So I don't know. It's a little bit weird how that happened. I mean, I guess for myself, if they do like a premium digital thing for Wrath Classic with rewards for both versions of the game, I'll probably buy it just because I tend to buy stuff like that. But I would be perfectly okay if they didn't. I don't know if we really need that. Although I'm sure with people's excitement level for Wrath, I'm sure you could certainly find a market for it.
Right. Yeah. And so along with this announcement, we also finally got the Joyous Journeys experience buff going live inside Burning Crusade Classic. That is the experience buff that we've been talking about for a while now. That's the 50% just increased experience buff. It's essentially Winds of Wisdom for Classic. So that is live, and you can go in and basically power level a character if you want to inside Burning Crusade Classic. That's now up and good to go, which is pretty crazy. You can also, if you want to, and this is actually a nice feature that I love about Classic, you can go and visit any innkeeper in a capital city to turn the buff on or off. Basically, this is your way of saying, hey, you know what? No, I really do want a Classic experience. This buff breaks or borks with what I was enjoying doing. I want to feel like I'm leveling in Classic, or I'm doing a challenge, and that challenge requires me to level normally, and this buff kind of screws that up. So, you can turn it off if you need to, which I think is a cool feature that they added in that.
Yeah, it's really nice. We were waiting for this for a long time. They announced it like over a month ago, and they said it would be on for the summer, and it took until like yesterday in NA. It's nice. I was messing around with this a little bit yesterday and today. It still doesn't feel fast enough for where I'm at, but then again, I'm also solo leveling a warrior, which is still torture early on in TBC. Like, everything just takes forever. But yeah. I mean, I'm glad this is here. I think it's really cool to take advantage of. Also, there are going to be the fresh realms at some point, right? So it will be in effect on those as well. So
yeah.
If you're planning on just starting from square one, once we get those pre-patch realms, then yeah, you'll be able to do that. I think this is really cool. I fully plan on getting my TBC Classic tune maxed out before Wrath. I don't really know why though. Like, am I going to play Wrath Classic very much? Like, I'm not going to. I know I'm not going to. Yeah. I'll get in there and I'll make a tune, and or I'll copy my. Well, I guess I don't have to copy my tune over. It's just getting patched, right? So I'll have my tune. I'll get in there. I'll spec myself out. I'll do some quests and be like, yeah, Wrath was really cool. And then I'll probably walk away from it for months. And then when I get bored one day, I'll play it a little bit more. And I'm not going to be like pounding levels to 80 so I can get in there and do Nax and Obsidian Sanctum and Malagos. Like, that's just not where I'm at. I'll be spending more time with Dragonflight Alpha than with, live Wrath Classic, I think. So, but I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I think it was a great era for the game. One of the greatest, arguably the greatest, not my personal favorite, but it really was a high watermark for the game. And I think players are going to find a lot of cool stuff in there to mine and have fun with for a really long time. And it's cool that it'll be preserved and accessible, and it's just a thing that you could go do at any time that you want to, is to just live in that era of the game. I am like a little bit concerned that because the end game is so stratified, that when you get deep into like Ice Crown's been out for months, and okay, Ruby Sanctum's been out for months. It's just like, well, what do we do now? I feel like by the end of Wrath, like, the game got so much more figured out. It was so much more kind of farmable in a way, and earlier expansions, like the previous two eras of the game, sort of had this end game where you worked your way from one instance to another, whereas Wrath sort of brought in a lot more catch-up gear, and you could essentially like skip entire portions of the end game in order to just do whatever was current. So once all that stuff is out, if you are just coming into Wrath or you're leveling up for the first time, you don't have to go through that process of like, okay, I got to find a group that do Nax 10 so I can start working my way into Wrath Endgame. And I wonder if that's going to be like as satisfying an experience long term as like vanilla classic WoW is, or like Burning Crusade classic could have been if they were going to do Burning Crusade era, which they're not doing. Like,
yeah.
I feel like Burning Crusade had that really broad end game that you had to do in specific chunks, and I think that would have been a cool thing to stand up forever, but they're weirdly not doing that. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be cool to take the ride and to see people doing it, and people who like, I mean, it's weird to think about, but there's a lot of players of the game these days who never really played Wrath of the Lich King, or like didn't play it very seriously when it was out. And it'll be interesting to see them play through it and how they react to it based on, how the modern game is and how some of the changes go over. They are making some pretty significant changes to Wrath Classic as well. So, which is, I think, more of a departure than we've seen in the past with the Classic kind of project.
Yeah, it's for me, my brain goes to Season of Mastery. That's where it goes right away, is what the Season of Mastery is going to look like. And I feel like that's something they're going to continue in Wrath, and they're going to have a lot of fun with in Wrath and play around with more. So that might be something where if there's a dead period of time in live game and it's Season of Mastery is just starting and you have 3 months, before something new comes out with live game, you dive in and do that Season of Mastery. I think it would be really cool. I think that is very attractive to me. Where everything's accelerated and you can sort of really have a good time with it. So I feel like that piques my interest. I don't know if I'll actually be super into this when it goes live and everything's going live with it, but we will see. Who knows? Maybe my leveling bug inside live will carry over to a leveling bug inside of BC, and I'll level a tune all the way up to be ready for Wrath. Might be something I do. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Once that train starts moving, man, it can be hard to slow it down. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You start getting that rhythm of like, okay, I got to fill up more bars.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's really rewarding getting this ding every chunk of time, and 50% reduction. How could I not? Like,
right?
Buy more
exactly.
and save.
I mean, yeah. I will say, like from what I briefly played, like I could use another 50% XP on my Burning Crusade too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like even with the plus 50%, like it feels better, but it doesn't feel fast enough. But then again, I spent most of the last month just in like turbo Shadowlands leveling town, where it's just everything you do, you're just getting rewarded for.
Yeah. All right. Battle for Wintergrasp in Wrath. Basically, they did a little blog post to explain how some of this is going to work. The Battle for Wintergrasp will be available in Wrath Classic as an instanced battleground, similar to Alterac Valley. This was not a deliberate design choice so much as a necessary change due to the nature of WoW Classic and the way our realms function. So that's interesting to me, right? So, back in the day, Wintergrasp was just a zone that if you flew into and a battle was going on, it dismounted you, which was also incredibly scary because you just fall out of the sky into a battlefield covered with people who are fighting things. And it was just a PvP zone where there was an objective, either the Horde or Alliance were attacking, and the opposite faction was defending, and you wanted to actually win, attack, win, unlock the vault, be able to do a bunch of the raid inside of the vault, which was kind of cool. So, I'm curious about what the really large issue was here, but it's important to note that you're going to be queuing for it, basically. It's how Battle for Wintergrasp is going to work. Is you'll queue up for Battle of Wintergrasp, and you'll maybe you can queue up for it by just flying into it. I don't know if that's clear or not yet, but that's something to note about how this new Battle for Wintergrasp is going to work.
Yeah, it sounds like the problems with sort of the incompatibility are basically, because they had to sort of re-envision a WoW realm for Classic, right? There are the active realms, like the populated ones in Classic, are way bigger than they ever would have been back in 2008, 2009, right? And they're expecting an influx of players for Wrath as well, and so the tools that they have to sort of deal with that population,
sharding
in Classic, it's layering, right? So you have this entire copy on top of itself. So you have like two different, effectively like outdoor instances of the world, with different players from the same realm populating them. Like, apparently that just does not mechanically work with the way Wintergrasp was built. So they had to reevaluate how they were going to implement it. And I mean, Wintergrasp was really ambitious, and it was cool when Wrath came out, but it did present, even some issues back when, even when it was a current thing we were playing. They sort of rebalanced how it worked and made changes to it over the course of Wrath's life cycle. So I'm not surprised that they sort of have to re-envision it for Wrath Classic. I do think it's kind of sad that it can't work the way that it used to, because it was such a cool feature.
It was very cool. Yeah.
If you got to play it back when it existed, they haven't really ever done anything exactly like that since. There have been some attempts to sort of recreate these types of, zone-wide PvP events or something, but Wintergrasp is really like the one. It was kind of the first real crack at it, and sort of like, what if we put Alterac Valley just like in the outdoor world? Almost, is like the idea. Yeah. And I think it did it the best. Tol Barad didn't really hit those heights, and we've seen some other stuff. Battle for Nashatar was not really the same kind of thing, but you could kind of trace it back to these types of experiments or these types of gameplay features. So, yeah, I think it's just impossible to kind of recreate how experimental that sort of was, which is a shame. I mean, but the bottom line is that the gameplay experience has to work for customers today. You can sort of evoke elements of how Wintergrasp worked without it being the exact same thing. But yeah, it's going to be a fair bit different than it. You're not going to have that emergent kind of experience of like, oh, I was in Sholazar and I happened to like scoot over into Wintergrasp as a battle was starting. And so I hopped in and just helped out. Like, you're going to have to deliberately participate in it. But, other than that, I think for most players, they're going to get the gist of it from what they're describing here. It's going to be close enough. I hesitate to say, like, I guess the bottom line is it can't be the way it originally was. Yeah. So you want to have it at all, right? It's sort of the way it's laid out here.
The interesting thing, the thing I remember most about one of the things I remember most about Wintergrasp that I loved was when I would take a flight path to Sholazar Basin, and it would fly me over Wintergrasp while a battle was taking place, and you could look down as you're on the flight path and watch all this battle taking place below you. In a lot of cases, you hit that get off flight path quicker button so that you could land and then hop into the battle with everybody else, which was always such a cool little thing to have happen. Joining Wintergrasp right now, they actually outline, they say every 3 hours, players in Outdoor Wintergrasp Zone or in Dalaran will receive a notification that the battle for Wintergrasp is about to begin. Players within the Outdoor Wintergrasp Zone will receive a queue prompt, and players in Dalaran may speak to an NPC within their faction's area to enter the queue during a short window of time. Once queued, players will be placed into a Wintergrasp battleground, and shortly thereafter, the battle will begin. However, unlike Alterac Valley, the threshold and the number of players on either faction needed to start the battle is significantly lower. This means that you could enter a battle with 40 players on Horde side and 5 players on Alliance, which is something we did see inside Wrath. And at first glance, this doesn't seem very fair, but the battle for Wintergrasp had an important and what could often be working for both sides, incredibly fun mechanic that we are bringing forward into the Battleground version, which is Tenacity. And Tenacity is a stacking buff that vastly increases the power of players on the underrepresented side. This can stack so high that players could conceivably become raid bosses unto themselves. This was a challenging and fun part of the original version of the Battle of Wintergrasp, and we felt it was important that we brought this back in some way. I have experienced being the raid boss. It's a lot of fun. I was a mage inside Wrath, and I definitely was in a Wintergrasp where there were 5 Alliance and 40 Horde, and all the Alliance were not only ginormous, but also you could like one-shot people with Frostbolts. You'd like cast a Frostbolt and someone would just fall over. And you're like, that felt really good. You wouldn't win because you need to have a certain amount of people to control vehicles, and then vehicles destroy walls and all that kind of stuff to happen. But it was a lot of fun, at least, which I think was cool. So I'm glad Tenacity's coming back.
Yeah, I mean I think this sort of it's a decently clever way to deal with the fact that you don't have this sort of dynamic zone of Wintergrasp where the battle's taking place, because you can start the battle with unequal team sizes, right? And you are bringing that idea of tenacity back into the gameplay, which I think, like, yes, it's not exactly the same, but it's going to feel very similar because you have that sort of that asymmetry is what a big part of what made Battle for Wintergrasp what it was, right? Like you never really knew what you were getting into. You very rarely had like fair teams squaring off in there. That wasn't the point of the mode even. So, yeah, and the fact that tenacity's coming back in, like, that was always super fun if you were outnumbered, just to have that huge buff and just be out there doing your thing. It felt great. So I don't know. I think it's a good compromise. It preserves as much of the gameplay as they can, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited that they are keeping tenacity. I'm excited that they're doing their best with Wintergrasp. They do end the whole blog post by just expressing their sincere regret that they were unable to find a solution to sort of allow for the original version of Wintergrasp to exist. Wintergrasp is still going to remain as an outdoor PvP zone. So basically, like, you could still just fly into Wintergrasp and find people and gank them and attack them, and that kind of stuff can still happen. But, just keeping in mind that when the actual battle kicks off and is underway, you'll then obviously be queued and it's layered and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I appreciate that they outlined why it's going to work the way it would work, because if it went live without them doing a blog post like this, I think there'd be a lot of people very confused and upset with what happened with Wintergrasp and what's going on with Wintergrasp. So just the importance of the communication.
Yeah, and they probably will be upset anyway.
Sure.
Even with this, and I think the devs really stressed in this post that, like, there was no way to make it the way that it used to be.
Yeah. Okay, with that, we're going to play a quick sounder for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. That's right. We have a Patreon over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. And if you are wanting to hop in and support the show, you can do that over there at patreon.com/startingzone. No new patrons this week. However, we appreciate everyone who does commit, subscribe to our Patreon and donate to our Patreon to support the show. And we have a call-in show coming up this Friday. That's the 29th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And patrons can submit questions for that. Jason, I know our mailbag for the general show is getting kind of full, and we might have to find a way to start to empty that mailbag at some point. But if you are a patron and you have a question, then you can be sure you get all your questions in on these call-in shows that we do, these Q&A episodes. Whether you can make it live or not, you can submit your questions, and we make sure they all get covered during our monthly Q&A episode that we do. And so for this Friday, question-wise, I was wanting to lean into the profession topic because we've talked a lot about professions. There's a lot going on with professions. And so I kind of want to know if anyone's considering switching professions based on what they've seen so far with Dragonflight, or how you manage your professions right now. Are you someone who's a individual crafter where you do everything for yourself? So in Dragonflight, you're planning on having a master crafter in every profession on 5 or 6 different characters who you just make everything yourself on your own account? Or are you someone who often leans on others or guildies or whatnot to be able to get stuff crafted for you? What's your plans for your profession stuff? And what are you excited about with the professions that are coming and the changes that are coming? So I want to hear that stuff from you guys on Friday. And as a question out to our patrons. And I mean, if you don't have a question for us, that's fine. Just submit your feedback to our question. We always appreciate reading those too and getting your thoughts on those sorts of things. So looking forward to chatting with some patrons on Friday, reading out your questions and covering your answer to ours.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually been a little while since we did a patron ep, so excited to see what's on people's minds. And I mean, it's been a lot since the last time we did one, right? With Alpha coming out and just getting a huge glimpse into what Dragonflight actually entails and all this information that we've gotten about it. And with season 4 just on the horizon and everything, I mean, there's so much happening. Obviously, Classic is all over the place with the final phase of Season of Mastery rolling out, and with this big ramp up into Wrath of the Lich King. It's just like, dude, there might be too much WoW to play right now. That's kind of what I'm feeling like myself. So yeah, I can't wait to see where people are at, what they're feeling, what they're thinking about with this stuff. And also, I just wanted to say thanks to several patrons who have increased their pledges lately. That really helps a lot in terms of keeping the show where it needs to be and help. I mean, we're putting out a lot of audio this month, right? It's like six or 7 episodes in July, which is, it's a lot to host and produce and everything. So we really appreciate that support. It helps us keep the show at the level that you guys expect and to keep it on schedule and keep it on track. So thank you, everybody, for helping us out and helping us make the best show we can. And we'll talk to you on Friday.
Yeah, and I'll emphasize once again, we only do the patron charge for our weekly episodes. So depending on how many Tuesdays there are in a month when we record and launch, that's how many payments go out in that month. When we do a month like this month where we just have 7 episodes, those are just bonuses. We just throw those in. There's no patron charge or anything like that happens. So your patron stuff is very consistent for what you're expecting out of it. So I just, wanted to be clear on that for patrons who might get concerned every now and then. When we do a 7 episode month, they're not going to suddenly see a big jump or something like that in the patron charge stuff. So just, we're consistent with that. All right. With that, if you folks have enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. They really help out our show. We love hearing from our listeners, and we read them here live. And we don't have one this week, which means that if you submit one this week, we will read it on next week's episode. So submit a 5-star. Take the minute of time out of your life, if you can, please and thank you. Deal with your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, which can be kind of a pain in the butt, and write us up a little 5-star. It helps raise us up those charts. It helps more people find our show. It helps keep us relevant. It helps us land those big interviews. It's always great and helpful for us. So if you can take a little bit of time for it, it is greatly appreciated. All right, that wraps up episode 532 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter, or you can join our Discord over at thestartingzone.com/discord. And if you're a patron, be sure you can for sure submit your questions to us for the Patron Call-In Show, either through Discord or through your actual Patreon page itself by sending us a message, and we'll gather all those up if you're someone who can't make it live on the show to ask, and that way you can be sure your question gets on the episode for this Friday. All right, if you want to get your hands on some TSZ gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/The Starting Zone. You can check out all the sweet designs we have on shirts and mugs and stickers and all that fun stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. Always talking WoW and whatever else I'm getting into. And you can find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald. Streams are typically Tuesday, Wednesday, and Sunday nights, 7:30 Eastern time, doing raids and keystones and stuff, and maybe some other just kind of hanging out, chill stuff. And Mondays for Dragonflight Alpha stuff. I'm probably going to get back on schedule this week. I missed Sunday and Monday because I just needed the time away. I needed to not be speaking all night long. So I think this week we'll probably be back on that intended schedule.
Cool. If you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.